Welcome to Gleaning and Gathering. This is a special episode today. I was with some of my friends from Calvary Life Fellowship at Fellowship Farm near Garden, Michigan on the Upper Peninsula, and we were at a prayer convocation not too long ago and recorded these interviews with them. Because I only had one mic, you can't hear the questions, but you can hear the answers. And so I am so delighted to be able to share with you a little of the conversation that I had with David Odell and Wayne Ostrander at Fellowship Farm.
Okay, the fellowship actually began in 1955. I didn't become even aware of it until 1958 or 59, long in there. In 55, Edgar Whiteman was a professor at Spring Arbor College in Lower Michigan. And he had the story I've been told, of course, I never got to meet him. The story I was told that he was, as a professor, he would go to the men's dorm telephone booth and call his wife at home and let the phone ring one time and hang up. And then his wife would know that means that she should call him back at the dorm. And, of course, at that time, it cost 10 cents to make a call. And so when he would hang up, he would get his 10 cents back before she could answer, of course. And the Lord began to speak to him and said, you know, you are cheating the telephone company a dime each time. And the Lord began to deal with him in a very serious way. And he had to go to the phone company and make some sort of confession and amends, which he did. And then I don't know a lot of his history, but I was, in 1958, I went to Owasso College, our church college, Wesleyan-related college. It wasn't Wesleyan at the time. It was called the Pilgrim Holiness College. And we had a professor there by the name of Floyd McCallum. He was a spark plug of a professor. He encouraged you to know the Lord in a deeper way. And as I understand it, he was maybe called to become president of a college out in Wichita, Kansas, I think it was. And so he asked Edgar Whiteman to ride along with him, and on the way out there, this Dr. McCallum said, maybe you are to become the president, Edgar, instead of me. And that's actually what happened. And Edgar Whiteman was, I think, president for maybe 1 or 2 years, but he never felt totally comfortable because he felt like the Lord was calling him to something deeper, maybe a ministry of fewer persons but more intense. And so after that 1 year or two, whatever it was, they found some property that had belonged to the Friends, I believe, in Central City, Nebraska. And I heard, this is just hearsay for me, but I expect it was fully the truth. I think they rented that property for $1 a year, and it had a school grounds and so forth. And Edgar, during a period of time, not real long there, developed cancer and passed away. And my only connection with that really was that Dr. McCallum in our chapel service would say, please pray for my friend Edgar Whiteman. And Edgar was not an old man. I don't know what age he might have been, but he may have been somewhere in his upper 40s or something like that. I'm guessing probably approximately around the same age as Dr. McCallum. And so when he passed away, the small group of believers there moved in probably 59 or late 58, I'm not sure, to Owasso, where Dr. McCallum was, sort of hoping that maybe he would become the new leader of the group. As it turned out, he never felt like that was his position, so he didn't go there. But that was where I became acquainted with the fellowship. And one of the other fellows that was at the same college, who was 2 or 3 years my senior there, Wayne Ostrander, actually became the director of the fellowship. And my association with Wayne was, we actually had grown up about 30 miles from each other, but we had gone to different high schools. So I had not met him until we went to college. And in college, they appointed seniors a big brother over freshmen coming in. And on one of the first days of school there, he came up to me and said, "Are you David Odell?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, "Well, I'm Wayne Ostrander, your big brother." When I shook hands with him, I would say the Spirit of the Lord touched me. I maybe wouldn't have said that right at that time, but as I've looked at it over the years, I realized the Lord was saying, "You'll be working together. You'll be working together," and we have been for over 60 years. To me, that was my initial introduction to the fellowship. Shortly after I had my second year, we moved to Nebraska, back to that, not to that particular campus, but we moved back to Nebraska, to that town, and then the Lord led us to Texas for a short period of time, and then to Colorado. We all had various jobs that supported the fellowship. I taught school. Actually, I had a teaching degree, and taught in Colorado. And then we just felt there was a calling to Alaska in 1971. And that's when we made the move to Alaska. Several of us, there were several that went, and 2 or 3 different caravans that went up there. Some were able to get away quicker, and I had to stay till the school year was over. And then we moved to Alaska. I remember getting into Alaska on the 4th of July of 1971. Yeah. It's pretty unique how the Lord, we didn't have much money, really. I think when I got there, I had $100 left. And we found the ones that had gone ahead of us actually searching an oil dump, which provided a lot of wood lumber for us. They had thrown away good pallets, and we had the children tear those pallets apart, straighten the nails, and we reused a lot of that material. So the Lord had different ways of providing for us. It was amazing, really, what the Lord did for us, and I could go into probably other examples of things that just were kind of out of this world. And at that time, it was considered a prayer group. It didn't. The purpose was not to become a large congregation. It was basically for intercessory prayer. And I know that when I was those first year or two in college, I had picked up a book about, I can't remember, it was about intercessory prayer, about a man in England. And I should be able to come up with his name right now, but I can't right now think of it. In that, and maybe I'll come up with it, but in that book, he was telling about a group in England that were praying during the war, World War II, I believe it was. And they discovered that when they got together and prayed, the German forces were moved back. When they dropped off praying, the German forces moved on. And it caused me to realize that we human beings have wonderful power with God if we are abiding in Him. And He listens to His people and responds to His people. And prayer isn't just a philosophical idea, it's a reality. And I had some personal experiences that I don't necessarily need to go into, but where the Lord showed me that He was real, that He's real. And I'll give you just a little example. When I was in college, I wanted to do the right thing. I had something in my heart that wanted to do right, but I wasn't sure what was right. And so one night I asked the Lord to show me. In fact, I don't know if you want me to bring in Catholics or not, but I said, Lord, show me, are we Protestants right or are the Catholics right? And I dozed off to sleep. But I was awakened, and I haven't told very many people this. I was awakened with a sense of evil force coming down the hallway, knocking against the walls of the hallway and coming into my door and clasping on my chest. And I thought I was dying. And what came to me was the blood of Jesus is what saves us. It's not whether you're Catholic or Protestant. It's whether the blood of Jesus covers us. And that was my only hope. I don't know if that thing that laid on my chest maybe for just a few seconds or what, just a few, I think. And then it lifted off, and I felt I could feel, I didn't see them, my physical eyes, I could feel angels in the room ministering to me. It's amazing. I mean, amazing for a 19-year-old to have that experience. That has affected my whole life, because I couldn't get away from that. The reality of God and His calling on our lives. And I don't just sort myself out as having a calling. I believe we all have callings. If we'll listen, if we are honest and want to talk to Him and ask Him, He's faithful to show us where we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to be. And it may not be a big ministry. I've sometimes misinterpreted that calling, My mother made some comments when I was a child that the Lord had something special for me. And so that kind of thing can give you a wrong direction, really. It's like being in a coat of many colors. It never should have happened for Joseph, but it did, and it caused him trouble. And so in some ways I've had a certain amount of trouble based on having the wrong thought about that. But the Lord is faithful, and He brings us eventually to what we're supposed to be as long as we look to Him. And I emphasize that. I write a few little booklets and emphasize that so much that we have to start our mornings with Him. It has to be done. I mean, that's the key, really, to a relationship with Him. Well, we took a lot of criticism. For one thing, we had a community setting, and this was in the 1970s, and communes were a big name at that time, and most of them had a negative connotation. We had to go through that with people criticizing us, but if there's a counterfeit, there's always the real. Yeah, there's the real. And there always will be a counterfeit. There's always opposition by Satan, and so we took a certain amount of criticism for that. And it causes some hurts and so forth, but you follow Him the best you know how and leave it in His hands. Well, when we were in Alaska, we felt two things especially. We felt a concern for a radio in Alaska, a Christian radio. And it happened that the town that we moved into had a Christian radio station, KSRM, Kenai Solid Rock Music, I think it was. Their acronym was KSRM. And the other concern was when we moved up there were several people that were involved in hospital work. We had several nurses in our group. We had an orderly, a man who was an orderly. We had a lab worker. And it just happened that in 1971, when we moved up here, we discovered that a hospital had been built in Soldotna, where we moved, near Soldotna. Had been built 4 years before, but had never opened because they didn't have an organization to run the hospital. It just so happened that when the first caravan arrived in Soldotna, that day, the hospital opened. That day. And I think some went to work the next day. I mean, it was just amazing. Just amazing. And I worked a few years at a fish cannery in the summertime, managing a warehouse. And in the wintertime, I would substitute teach, and the Lord provided lots of time. I would sometimes work, most of the time, 5 days a week, substituting. And then eventually I got a job at the hospital as a purchasing manager and worked there for 17 years. But back to your original question, we began to take in people. Well, first of all, we had a neighbor that had an 11-year-old boy, and the neighbor had to be gone during the week and wanted to know if we would house him and see that he got to school during the week, and we did that. And then when people discovered we were around there were people that had young children that wanted to drop their children off, or have some of our girls babysit those children. Well, we did that for just a short period of time and realized this was not ideal because these parents would be bringing our girls home at midnight. So we said, if you want to us babysit, you leave your children with us. And so we started taking in children. And we might have, there were times we would have a dozen children through the night. And eventually, and then as these parents often had fishing jobs in the summertime, they would be fishing out for the 6 weeks or whatever of the summertime for salmon. They would leave their children with us for those 6 weeks. There were nights when we had as many as 25 or 30 young children with us. And it was such a busy time and such a tiring time, you might say, that we actually had to build a separate bedroom for a different couple each night to stay in that bedroom to keep an eye on the children, so that one couple wouldn't get too wore out. Yeah. And then it came to the place where our young people, many of them growing up together, we sent to a college down in North Carolina, a Wesleyan College. And incidentally, by the way, that college had taken in two of our professors, including Dr. McCallum, in that college in North Carolina. He'd moved from Michigan down to North Carolina. And we wanted them to be under his ministry, too. And then we began to take in more of like homeless people at the house there. And we've done that for many, many years now. Yeah. Well, we have an outreach ministry, and we actually built a house or two down in North Carolina. And I can't go through all the details. We made a move to Missouri for a period of time, but everybody kind of seemed to miss Alaska. So we moved back there. But when our children were in college, we bought a farm in Michigan, Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and developed that. And we use that as an outreach ministry. Occasionally we'll bring someone down from our home in Alaska, help them get away from their habits there, we hope. And they can help out on the farm as well. That's where we are today. And at my age, 84, we're looking at turning it over to the younger people and just praying that the Lord will send the right ones in to continue whatever ministry he would have.
Incorporated as a 501c3, whatever, in 1955 by Edgar G. Whiteman, who was president Free Methodist College in Kansas. Dr. McCallum, who was one of my teachers at Owasso College, got called out to the Kansas College to become president. And he asked his best buddy, who was also a teacher. And they were both teachers at Spring Arbor, a Free Methodist college at the time. So they drove out there, and when they got there to the board, Dr. McCallum, who had been called, said, "I think you got the wrong guy. I think it should be my buddy here." And so he became president, and he was the president for 2 years. During that time, they came into revival, and staff and students and everybody was turning to the Lord in a way that never had happened, really. And behind that partly was a man from Ireland named Tom Hare, who was a plumber. But he also was a prayer. He'd pray like 3 nights a week, all night. And he had a plumbing business. And he was known enough that religious organization in Lincoln, Nebraska, had called him to come to help them pray to get out of debt. And he did, and they got out of debt. Well, anyway, he was behind Edgar Whiteman every step and every decision they were making during that the board at the Free Methodist College in Kansas, they weren't there for the revival. You know, they were businessmen out there, and they weren't there experiencing the presence of the Lord and the moving of the Spirit. So after 2 years, they didn't want him anymore. So he left and went to Nebraska to an old Quaker Friends college that had closed down, had been closed for several years. And I think they let him have it, so to speak, for $1 a year or something like that. So, and quite a few of his staff also left, and students went to Central City, Nebraska. And that was the beginning of Calvary Life Fellowship. Well, in 3 or 4 years, he died of cancer. I'm a student at Owasso College, and Dr. McCallum is a teacher at Owasso College. And we're having Friday noon prayer meetings, I think it is, for men in the men's dorms. And this Dr. McCallum is bringing up his buddy having cancer and in bad shape. And so I was in on that, praying for a year maybe before he died. And then when he died, shortly after, at least one of the staff at Owasso College went out there had already gone out there. Been one of my teachers, had already gone out there and joined that work. So in 1960, I was there from 56 to 60. This Dr. McCallum from Owasso and the teacher that had gone out to Calvary Life, Zetta Traver, sociology teacher that I'd had. They asked me to come with the two of them to go to Ireland to this Tom Hare and to this Tom Hare had been asked to be the prayer leader for the Free Methodists to start a work in Northern Ireland. So he asked for us to come as a prayer team to join him to pray for that. So we did. We went there. I'm a student, and those are two college professors. And when we got there and started praying about the Free Methodists wanting to start a work in Northern, it just seemed like there was nothing to it. You know, I mean, there was no sense of the Lord, concern of prayer there. But there's also Billy Graham that was having prayer meetings citywide with the leaders, preachers and stuff for a campaign that Billy Graham was going to have. And so we went to that and prayed for that. And so that's my beginning. In 1960, I left Owasso College and went to Nebraska and joined the fellowship there. Well, and I've been with them ever since. Yeah. After 10 years or so, I became their leader, and I've been there with the fellowship ever since.
Yeah. 64 years.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's been a long time, yeah.
So how would you describe the fellowship to someone that had never heard of it? How would you describe?
I would describe the fellowship as a group of people that are waiting before the Lord and wanting the Lord in a deeper way. Or, they're Christians, they're following the Lord the best they know, but they're being led inside, wanting a deeper life. They're wanting more of the Lord. The time in Central City, I was there 10 years in Nebraska. And they had, we had dormitories and some houses and a church and that we bought and Bible classes and so on. Not a big, but it was during that period that one of the students that came to us, he brought along with him the writings of T. Austin Sparks.
Okay.
He's a student, and his dad, I think, was a preacher. And that's the first time I ever heard of T. Austin Sparks, sometime in the 60s. And, it's not easy reading or whatever. So it probably was, even though it was the introduction, and then the years went on, I got into more of his writings. And the Tulsa place had come across his writings. And I was told by someone I met in our travels that said, you may want to go to Tulsa and meet these people. They didn't particularly, they knew the people, but they didn't particularly. So I did. And that started the relationship surrounding their desire to have T. Austin Sparks books. At that time, I had met the man that had the permission from T. Austin Sparks, who knew him, and he was a businessman in Bethesda, Maryland. An older man, a businessman. I don't know if he was Brethren in Christ or something like that, as far as a denomination, but so I went to see him and to buy some of the books. And at that point, he had like 230 or 60 people in the U.S. on his mailing list. Not that much, right? But he had the authority in the books and he was selling them. And I went there and bought some. Well, eventually, he was old, and he got a couple, and then he got a prisoner that had been converted, I guess, that came there and helped him. And then eventually he died out, and it ends up with this prisoner, ends up with the books. And he's really not into it. He comes to our place for, I think, 3 months, and then he goes to Louisiana, someplace, in a book place that sells books. He takes all the books of T. Austin Sparks and gives them to that. And I go there, and the people from Tulsa go there. And the books, T. Austin Sparks books, meant nothing to the man down there, or people. They were selling religious books, but T. Austin Sparks was nothing. And they sat in the corner back in their room somewhere. So eventually, the people from Tulsa asked me, because I've had connections with the books about it, whether if they bought them, whether I thought it would be right that they could give them away, which I felt was the thing to do, even though I didn't have any permission. The man that had permission from Sparks from England had died, and the prisoner guy, he had really just gotten rid of them. So they went down there and bought the books in Tulsa, from the Tulsa. And that couple ran it for years. Then Sparks here lived in Tulsa. He was a pharmacist and had a business, and his wife was a pharmacist, and they were tending the church where the T. Austin Sparks people, Stan and Loretta Carson. Stanley was insurance vice president of a company, and his wife was a wonderful teacher of the Word. Anyway, they end up buying all those books from down in Florida or Louisiana, somewhere down there, and start giving them out. And this Sparks, who goes to that church, became acquainted with it. And I really think because his name is Sparks, he starts putting money up. And eventually, this guy puts up, I would say, millions. Well, it's maybe not millions, but they end up giving away millions of books, mostly financed by this man. Not that they didn't finance some from the local people there, but that's how that connection, yeah. Now, what we have done basically is take in homeless people, people off the street, mostly word of mouth, and never advertised, never promoted anything. But we developed more rooms to our place so that we could take in the people that were coming to us. We would not charge them any money unless they had a job and had an income. Then we would ask for a contribution of $150 a month for their room and board, helping the cost. And we've done that for 53 years in Alaska. We've never lacked people, and we've had everything that's out there in the world come through our doors. And we rarely would ask someone to leave. For the most part, we would pray that they would either, if they were acceptable to, have chapel 5 days a week and prayer meeting and twice on Sunday, and they were commendable to do that. And then they would stick around. If they weren't, the pressure of something that they weren't into, they'd move on. So that's basically how it's worked through the years. Well, I would say it's a mission. It's a mission, and the mission is dealing with homeless, down and out people, sometimes up and out people. Because we'd have people come that once in a while are well educated, but they have fallen through the cracks of mostly the religious systems, and they needed a place for a period of time. Well, people want to say that you're commune. Yeah, they want to put that name on you. But would we say your place is a commune? I mean, there's more than you part of the time. It's just the world system of trying to down. There was at one point when people would take in somebody, and there was a program where the government would give them money to help people that were down and out, so to speak. Well, we were having the people come to our place. We weren't charging. They were getting money. So there were 11, I think, in our local community, I'd say a 10, 15-mile radius, that came against us because we had 25 children that we were taking care of. And they were wanting money from the government. And so they got the government against us. And so we had, we didn't have any permits to, and we never have, and we don't want to. We don't want the government, and we don't think the government has anything to do with the religious aspect, and shouldn't. But a lot of churches would comply with the governmental system to get money or get ties or whatever. And there was quite a movement back 30 years, 40 years ago, whether you conform to the government, really. I mean, that 501c is conforming to certain. Now, today, that 501c is, well, it's not very religious, I don't think. Could be, but it doesn't, not necessarily. So that was an issue at some point. But that didn't alter us at all in the sense that, so we sent the 25 children away. Some went to live in cars because they didn't really have homes. But the one child that we had taken in that was an epileptic and other physical and mental conditions, and was maybe 9 or something. The government didn't want her, left her with us because they didn't want that problem. Nobody would take somebody like her, but we, of course, had taken her, and the mother had left her with us, and she'd been with us several years. Well, that was kind of interesting when it comes to the government opposing the religious, but when it came to a key problem that they didn't know what to do with, they just left her with us. She remained with us still a long time before finally they had a program in Anchorage, I think, and that she's probably there yet today. Yeah, I would say 2,000 or 3,000 probably. But you're talking 53 years in Alaska. Well, our ministry is to deal with down and out people. The Salvation Army would deal with people in the churches from the whole peninsula, would maybe deal with somebody like we would have. But what they would do is put them in a motel for a night or two, but no permanent solution and if they were to have a ministry, they would think that they had to have X amount of dollars, and it would take a year or two for them to develop a program and hire people and have a building or buildings and just everything that the natural man would reason that you got to have before you can have a ministry. Well, that isn't the truth. The truth is you're to bring the poor that are cast out to your house. Yeah, that's scripture. And it's just that simple. If you do that, you've got a ministry, not to hang up a sign like that. It's not that. It's just you're following the Lord in ministering to people. It has nothing to do with your education, but what the world system does of the building and people and personnels and with master's degrees or PhDs or whatever before they can do that. And that's not where life is. Oh, well, I know that we're looking at, and we have for years, knowing what to do with the properties. And we have finally signed off on it just in the last few months to some of our, 6 people of our that are interested in the younger generation. But we also know there's others like you that are part of it, really. But to sign it off to your daughter or son or something like that, there's not the complication like if you put other names on it. But, and Richard's got his idea of ministry is kind of, he wants so much money. Where's the money coming from? So we got to have some kind of program to have some source of income. Well, we've never operated that way. We operated that, Isaiah 58, you take them in and the Lord provides. And that's really how we've lived all these years. Oh, yeah, in the next generation, they'll have to come to it through their spirit before the Lord and death to self, like you preached this morning, which was wonderful, because that's the premise. I of myself can do nothing. Our dependency is totally on Him. And I find myself, I don't know how many times in a week, just figuratively in my mind, I'm just on my knees before the Lord in other brokenness or dependency, knowing that today can't be the Lord's unless I'm out of the way and He's totally directing. And that's that was what's so wonderful about your message, because you see that other dependency upon God, and you voiced some of your beginnings, which was the church's way of development, and you grew up in it. You're naturally that's the way you go, and that's the way I was. But I had to come to absolutely dependency, and yep, and that is the only real fellowship in the Lord, and it's in Him. Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking time. I appreciate you sharing this, and I'm glad we got it recorded.
Yeah.
Future generations.
Yeah. Yeah. And people like here coming, it's interesting, because all of them want something more of God, really.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I certainly did. It was a great opportunity to catch up with two heroes of the faith that have faithfully walked with God across the years, and I'm just very thankful for Brother David Odell and Brother Wade Ostrander. God brought them into our lives back in 2004. I was speaking in Pennsylvania when I met them for the first time, and then later on, God just used them in a special way to help us and our family. In 2011, we were in a spot where we weren't sure quite what to do, and God brought them in answer to our prayers, and they ended up helping us to work on the farmhouse here at Victory Acres and be able to get our family into that space in early 2012. And it was really that time that God used to just knit our hearts together. And over these past 12 years, we've just had wonderful fellowship, visiting their place there in Alaska and going to Fellowship Farm numerous times in the Upper Peninsula, but also many times of them visiting us here. And just really special friends. We're so thankful for them, and just thankful for the ways in which God has used their lives to shape us. Many times we learn from people and their experiences. God certainly can use all kinds of different ways to teach us lessons, but I remember one of the lessons that He taught me. I was just feeling so humbled by them coming to help us with the farmhouse and having a conversation with Sister Dolores, David's late wife. She passed away just a couple of years ago. But in talking with her, I was just really saying, I'm just so sorry that you all have to go through this and deal with the difficulties and the challenges that they were dealing with, and living in a house that they were working on at the time, and cooking every meal in a crock pot. And she was the one who was doing most of the cooking. I will never forget her response to me. She said, "Oh, Brother Eric, don't be sorry. This is how God teaches us. This is what God does. We don't need to be sorry for our circumstances. He brings things to us to help us and to shape us." Listening to them over the years and their experiences, the things that they've been through, and the challenges that they've faced as a community, and particularly as a community in the middle of a very challenging place there in Kasilof, Alaska. It's very remote. And their trust for God as they were working on one of the first houses that they had there at the fellowship, and trying to figure out how they were going to get money for insulation. One of the people worked for a public school system, and so they ended up taking the styrofoam plates that had been eaten on, and they would bring them home, the bags, and they would wash all those styrofoam plates. And then they would use those for insulation. And that's how God provided for them. Their ingenuity and the ways in which they just were willing to suffer for the cause of the kingdom, but so that they could be close to brothers and sisters, is challenging to me. I am just so thankful that God's given me the opportunity to get to know them. Their influence in my life can't be understated. I'm very thankful for it. So that's my connection with Calvary Life Fellowship, and just wanted to share that with you today. For Gleaning and Gathering, God bless.